Hey, what's up guys? Ratnoon here, back with another video. I've had the chance to mess around with Willbender for a couple of days now, and I've come up with multiple semi-viable builds for it. But this is the one that I feel mostly confident about, at least at the moment of recording this video. So I thought I'd share it with you all. Enjoy the video, guys. So this will be a roamer type build, or a +1 if you're more familiar with that term. The idea behind a roamer is to rotate between nodes quickly, eliminate players who have few to no cooldowns by outnumbering them with high burst damage. In the past, this role has been mostly occupied by the Thief, as they've always had the superior mobility. But now with the Willbender, we as Guardians finally have something to compete with. Alright, let's look at the traits first. So we're running Radiance, Virtues, and Willbender for this build. Radiance because we get resolution every time we use a heal skill, which basically helps us survive against condition-based builds. And we also get increased strike damage when we have resolution, so that's very nice synergy right there. And lastly, for the ultimate synergy, we have Righteous Instincts, which increases our chance to critically strike, and also grant might when we have resolution. So these all synergize really well. So all of this means that we actually have the greatest damage potential when we have resolution active. Okay, so how can we trigger resolution? Well, we actually have multiple ways of triggering it, and one of the maybe most obvious ways is to trigger this healer's resolution by using a heal skill. But it's not always optimal to use our heal skill in order to get more damage, because, well, you might end up needing it later on. But the good news here is that we have resolution on all of our virtues as well. So both our F1, F2, and F3 have resolution on them. And Radiant Power is actually nice because it increases our ferocity and crit chance when foes are burning. And previously with Guardian, you had a burning on the passive virtue effect. And when you used one of those virtues, and the skill went on cooldown, the passive effect was inactive. But now it's replaced by Willbender Flames, which only activates when you use one of your virtues. So this is a lot nicer in order to trigger the Radiant Power. Justice is Blind is also quite nice because we get a minus 10% decrease in incoming condition damage when we use our F1 due to the light aura, which is granted to us by this trait. And remember, we also get resolution from our virtues, and this does stack, so it's putting us at a nice minus 43% incoming condition damage. So this build is fairly good against Conley builds. Renewed Focus is also worth mentioning because if you're able to kill something while Rushing Justice is active, you actually get the cooldown back, so you can use it again. So overall, there's a lot of value to get from the Radiance trait line. Next we have Virtues. Unscathed Contender boosts our damage by 20% while we have Aegis. And while we don't have a lot of sources for gaining Aegis, we do get it from our F3 and also our Shield 4. I also think this trait is quite a viable option here as well. This one makes you gain resolution and Aegis when you get CC'd, so that's actually a really nice way of gaining Aegis. But unfortunately these are on the same line, so we can only pick one of them at the same time, but yeah, Unscathed Contender is my favorite here. Absolute Resolve is nice because it removes conditions from you and your nearby allies when we activate our F2. And our F2 now has 2 charges, so that's actually really nice of getting a little bit of healing. And they actually boosted the initial healing on F2, so it's quite significant now, so that's really nice. And lastly, we got Indomitable Courage, which adds 3 stacks of stability to our F3, and it's also making it a stun break. And the stability also shared with our allies, which is really nice for some team support. Power of the Virtues doesn't really do much for us since this is a power-based build, but I guess it does add a little bit of damage to the burning we apply. And Virtue of Resolution is also important to mention because the source of resolution for the Virtue skill is this. So it's also quite nice because it makes it so that when we activate any of the virtues, the resolution we grant has a plus 25% increased duration. Alright, onto the Willbender traits. Let's go over everything here since it's brand spanking new. Willbender training. The Guardian virtues are now movement based, giving them a swift advantage in combat. Gain access to the physical skill type. Power for power is the move here, guys. This gives us an additional 120 power, which helps with the power damage. And we also get a 100% boost to our Willbender flame damage, which is activated when we're using any of the virtues, as you can see from the tooltip here. Righteous Sprint gives us a base movement speed of plus 25%, which is huge for Guardian. We also get swiftness every time we activate a virtue, and this makes getting in and out of fights so much easier and helps fight the rather small health pool of Guardian. Vanguard Tactics makes it so that when we activate Crashing Courage, that's our F3, it grants resistance, which helps us stay mobile, and this is especially helpful if you need to get out of a bad situation. Shadow Stepping also grants resolution and protection, and this one is quite big. So our F3 is a Shadow Step. It says in the tooltip, Shadow Step, a short distance, blah blah blah. But our offhand Sword 5 is also a Shadow Step, and our Roiling Light is a Shadow Step. So all of these abilities will now grant us resolution and protection. And remember what resolution does to us? See? It increases our strike damage, it increases our chance to critically strike, and we get might. So our resolution uptime should be pretty close to permanent here, making it a whole lot easier to survive those nasty condition builds, which has haunted the meta for far too long now. Lethal Tempo boosts our damage through the activation of virtues. It gives us a buff, which stacks when we attack after activating a virtue. This stacks all the way up to 5 stacks, giving us a maximum boost of 20% increased power and condition damage. Lastly, Tyrant's Momentum, boosting the last trait we went over. It makes it so that duration is a little bit shorter, although the duration of F1 is increased by 2 seconds. So overall, this boosts our damage even further. All in all, this build has good survivability against condition-based builds, but we do get rather quickly shredded by power-based builds. So watch your HP, guys, and use that movement to your advantage, is my tip for you. So before we look at the skills and a couple of combos that you can practice on the battlefield, let's look at the equipment that you want to run. I've been back and forth between Marauder's Amulet and Berserker's Amulet. I think both are viable options, but in general, you want to run Berserkers for the maximum damage output. This is a roamer, and you're not supposed to sit in team fights for long. You can't survive that anyways. So maximizing our damage to be able to do those quick rotations, quick burst to shut down fights quickly is quite crucial. So Berserker is the move here. However, if you find it hard to survive, or maybe you're not used to running squishy builds, start off with Marauder's Amulets, and then you can practice the build, and when you feel like you've mastered the build and start to feel confident about it, you can go back to the Berserker's Amulet for a pretty nice damage boost. And for the runes, I think there are multiple viable options. Divinity, let me get that up here. Divinity is good for like an overall boost to stats, and also a pretty nice plus 10% to our HP. But I think Rune of Speed is probably the way to go, because it maximizes our potential to rotate and roam effectively, as it increases our movement speed by 50% while under the effect of swiftness. But I think there are multiple good options here. Weapons, you want to run double sword as your main weapon set, but for the second one, I like to switch it up every now and then. Scepter Shield has become my favorite, but Greatsword is also a nice option if you're looking for pure damage. Greatsword greatly increases our damage actually, but it also greatly reduces our survivability in my opinion. Both are options you can experiment with. Just know that if you pick Greatsword over Scepter Shield combination, you will be losing out on one of our primary sources of gaining protections, and maybe more importantly, Aegis. Energy Cleansing is what I generally run on both weapon sets, but if you run Greatsword, you could take out a Cleansing Sigil, maybe for exposure or battle, even intelligence, but generally I like Cleansing more. Just giving you guys some options here. Alright, let's look at the weapon skills and utilities. So, we'll start off with Scepter Shield. Auto attack is auto attack, nothing special. But Scepter does give you an option to attack from range, which is pretty nice, although the auto attack sound is fairly annoying. Symbol of Punishment is, yes, you guessed it, a symbol that strikes foes, but when you step on it, you actually gain might as well, which is really nice. And it's also shared to allies, which is kind of cool. A little bit of support there. I usually try to put this under me and my enemy when fighting, sort of like this. And then I'll hop onto the sword set. But sometimes that can be really hard to do. But Chains of Light is actually really nice because it's a 900 range immobilize. And it puts 5 stacks of vulnerability on your target. So this can be a nice ability to engage with. Put Chains of Light on the target from range. And then Shadow Step maybe. With some bursts. Something like that, you know. Shield of Judgment, as we talked about previously, gives you protection and Aegis. Helps you survive power damage basically. And the boons are also shared with nearby allies, which is a nice bonus. It also does a tiny bit of damage to foes in front of you, as you can see here. Bada bing, bada boom. Kinda like that. Shield of Absorption creates a dome around you, and it also pushes foes back. So kinda like this. And then you absorb projectiles, so if a ranger tries attacking you with his longbow, he's not gonna do any damage. So this is quite nice to have. It's pretty clutch against rangers or other projectile-based attacks, but it's also just a really nice interrupt. Sword. Auto attack, nothing special here other than that your third auto attack has a 3 times damage multiplier. Symbol of Blades is one of the OG mobility skills of Guardian. While the 600 range teleport is quite nice, it does however require a target. Although on landing you blind foes, and that can be quite clutch going into a team fight or a group of enemies. It does fairly good damage, and it also grants fury to you and your allies. Zealot's Defense blocks ranged attacks while casting magical projectiles. I'm really bad at using this to block projectiles, at least on purpose, but it does do pretty good damage. You are stationary while using this attack though, so it kind of breaks the pattern with this mobility of the build, but we're stuck with it, so learn to use it to your advantage. Executioner's Calling, this attack actually has 2 parts. The first attack hits like a wet noodle, but the second attack can hit a lot harder, so make sure you land both hits. It also applies some vulnerability, which is really nice. Advancing Strike is, however, one of our shadow steps. First of all, it does really good damage, but it also slows and immobilizes our target. Let's quickly talk about our utilities before I show you some gameplay and how you can use all of this information in order to shred on Willbender. Shelter is our heal. It's a pretty nice heal on a decent cooldown, which also blocks attacks for 2 seconds, which is pretty cool. It also gives you some additional defense if you're in a bad situation, which is usually the case if you need to use your heal skill. Whirling Light is one of the new physical type skills. You spin forward, dealing damage, and you also apply burning and weakness to your foes. It's also on a very low cooldown, so don't be afraid to use this all the time. Flash Combo is our last shadow step. It does good damage, and if all the attacks hit, the skill flips over and you gain access to repose, which gives you the option to return to your previous location. So if I shadow step to this target, I leave a mark on the ground and then I can press it again and I'll go back to that mark, which is pretty cool. Roiling Light is a stun break. You dodge backwards and you blind foes, and also you gain swiftness. So this is also an evade frame, which is really nice. And look at this as both a stun break and I guess a 3rd dodge. No, actually 5th dodge, because we have an evade frame on our 2 charges of Flowing Resolve. So this is an evade frame, and this is an evade frame, and this is an evade frame. But yeah, it's on a fairly high cooldown, so I wouldn't use this just for dodging, but it has the option. But more importantly, when you use it the first time, it flips over and you gain access to Quick Retribution, which is a very nice skill because it rolls you forward, and this time you daze your target. So very nice ability overall here. A lot of value to gain from this. And lastly, our SOS, Renewed Focus. This is the button you press when you have nothing left. You're gonna die if you don't press this. Makes you invulnerable for 3 seconds, and it also recharges all of our virtue skills. So this is really nice. So make sure to use all of your virtues before you press this. That way you gain the most value out of this fairly long cooldown. Before we look at the combos, I want to go over the virtue skills so you guys understand how these work. Our Rushing Justice, our F1, is basically a rush. You rush towards your target, and you gain Justice, delivering a strike, and emanating Willbender Flames. So it has an impact that does very good damage actually, and you apply lots of burns. You gain Might, you also gain Resolution as we went over earlier, and the Light Aura from the traits from Radiance, and then we also get a bunch of Swiftness. So this is really nice to engage with, kind of like this. And then our F2, our Flowing Resolve, is an evade frame, and also you can use it for mobility, but most importantly, it's a heal. So you have an initial heal, but then you also apply regeneration to yourself, and this can also be used to get out of cripple, freeze, immobilize, stuff like that. So it looks like this. Range isn't very impressive on it, but the boons you get is very good, and you have 2 charges, and the cooldown is fairly decent, so use this as often as possible, and it also serves as like additional dodges with the 3/4 second evade frame you get, so pretty nice. Crashing Courage is a shadow step, as we went over, and you get a bunch of boons from this as well. Swiftness is one of them, so whichever virtue you use, you're gonna get a lot of swiftness, so it just makes it really nice to use to either engage in a fight or get out of a fight. It's also Stun Break, so you can use this to get out of a bad situation. It applies protection and resistance, and also resolution, so it makes you durable. And the stability is really nice. It's also shared with your allies, so you're immune to CCs for a little bit. 4 stacks actually. And you get Aegis, so you block the next incoming attack. And if you land this on a target, it actually does pretty good damage. As you can see there. Actually pretty good damage. But your biggest damage from the virtues is going to come from your Q. Bada bing, bada boom. Alright, combos. Let's look at a couple of combos before I let you see some gameplay. A combo that I like is F1 followed by 5, 4, and then Whirling Light, so it kind of looks something like this. And then into the spin, kind of like that. If you're on Scepter Shield, you can start putting the Symbol of Punishment down, then Chains of Light, rush in, and then switch to Sword and do the same combo. I also quite like F1 5 into Rolling Light, then Quick Retribution, which is kind of like this. Bada bing, bada boom. That's also quite nice. Alright, that was a couple of combos, but overall there's just a lot of ways you can combine these skills, but that's some of my favorite combos so far. If you enjoyed this build and found it helpful, please give it a thumbs up, as it really does help other people like yourself find this video. If you're interested in seeing more build guides, PvP commentary, or Guild Wars content in general, please consider subscribing to the channel. And lastly, if you have any questions regarding the build or anything else in general, just drop them in the comment section below. I try to get back to every single one of you, so don't be shy. Alright guys, thanks for watching. I've been Ratnoon. Until next time, peace.